Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Sarcasm and Liberty Wednesday night live stream. I'm your host, Mike Ursery, aka the Liberty Ginger. First of all, I want to apologize. We had some technical difficulties. Google was being difficult, but now we've got everything worked out and we are live. Most of the usual panel is with us tonight. The annoyed monarchist otter, who is on the road but still with us. The pure madness one. Madness, how are you?
Same as always, I still live here, so not good.
You still live in the EU. All right.
Yep.
Well, we know. Our resident meme lord, Michael Leoncello, and back from his sabbatical is the paleo libertarian. The rest of you, how are you doing?
Doing well. Waiting for snow.
I cannot stand snow. You might notice that we have
Oh,
a new person on the
beautiful
panel
and romantic.
tonight. You might notice we have a new person on the panel tonight. As earlier, we said that we are going to have a special guest. You might know her on Twitter as Gold Pill Brown. Alicia Roy, thank you for joining the stream. How are you?
Good. Excited to be here.
Awesome. We're excited to have you here. Now, what we're talking about tonight is we're talking about engaging people who either don't know anything about libertarianism, or they might be new to libertarianism. Now, Alicia is a person who has kind of been all over the political spectrum. You have been a Democrat in the past. You've also been a Republican in the past. You're pretty new to libertarianism now. I think we'll start out with, I'll ask you about, how did you get to where you are now politically?
So I grew up in a very dogmatic family, and they just taught me you're a Republican. Like, it was an identity thing. It's like you have curly hair, you know, this is just something that's part of you. And I grew up with this family that didn't really do a good job of telling you why you were supposed to believe what you believed. And so I spent a lot of time just believing that all Democrats were evil, and it's the us versus them mentality that we get into. And over time, I just kind of felt like there had to be some non-truth to that. You know, you go to high school and meet kids that's parents are Democrats and they seem like nice people. They don't eat children at dinner. And you kind of figure out these are probably okay people. Oh. I'm not sure if that's coming from me or...
I don't know.
It's madness.
Okay.
What is?
There's like high-pitched squealing.
Okay.
What's
All right, it's
squealing?
gone now.
Yeah, it went away.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So then I went to college, and you know, colleges are often portrayed as indoctrination camps for a reason. And I had a lot of professors that kind of just sold me on becoming a Democrat. And a lot of that is, if your parents or your foundation has not bothered to teach you how to think and instead have taught you what to think, the first person who actually brings up arguments for you is going to seem really rational, because nobody's ever explained your beliefs to you beyond, we believe this thing for this religious reason. And in my case, my parents were very religious. And so then as I left religion, I also just left being a Republican. And I stayed very comfortably a Democrat until about the end of 2015. And I initially thought that Bernie Sanders seemed like a genuine person, but I didn't necessarily like his ideas. And then watching what happened to Bernie Sanders really kind of was a wake-up call that these people are not very honest. They don't actually care about the will of the people. This is about securing candidates who feel like they are going to continue to vote the party line. And that really helped me to say, I don't know that I want to continue to fall into this one or the other. I became pretty disenchanted with politics for a little bit. And then after a little bit, I decided that that doesn't really make sense either, because they still have so much of a say in our lives. I started paying attention to, within my career, what a lot of people come in under arrest for. And a lot of it is nonviolent. And I've recently become related through marriage to somebody who has repeated drug offenses. He has no violent offenses that I know of, or anything that would be a crime if it were not him making choices for what to do with his body. And I think that kind of helped me go down the road of, do our laws actually make sense, or are they about controlling us?
Okay, so a lot of your own experiences and people you know have really kind of caused you to kind of question the status quo, and then that kind of put you down the road to where you are now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. How long have you been a libertarian? It's only been a few months, right? It hasn't been that long.
I would say I've probably been a skeptitarian. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Since about the beginning of the year. I think a lot of it for me is that I have trouble saying I'm going to be an exact libertarian, because there's often a feeling that there are not plans for what happens if we actually remove the government for groups that are disenfranchised, needy, poor, older. It's kind of like, well, I didn't sign a social contract, so those people aren't any of our problem. Sorry if they die. And coming from a human services background, those people will die. And I'm not really okay with advocating to kill people, even if it's in a non-aggressive way, under the non-aggression principle. I don't know that it makes sense to be okay with just letting tons of people die because they bought into a faulty government.
Okay. Well, since you've been in this community, the first question I'm going to ask you is, whenever you first got into this community, what has been your experience with people that you've either tried to interact with, people you've questioned, maybe trying to learn more about something? Has it been welcoming, or has it been not welcoming in some ways?
I would say it's been a mixed bag. It's been very welcoming. I would say that the biggest issue I've run into is ideology and passion are great, but I haven't felt like there has been a whole lot of substance and thinking beyond, well, taxation is theft. Well, great, but how do we actually enact policies? You know, you run into your collapsitarians, your anarchists, and yeah, some of those don't involve necessarily having a plan, but if you're a young man in the prime of your life, it's okay for there not to be a plan for your security. If you have a 90-year-old grandmother sitting in a nursing home that needs 24/7 care, you need to feel that there's a plan. And I don't know that we're going to easily engage people who are not fully self-sufficient if we continue to preach this, well, I didn't sign a social contract, I'm not responsible for your care. Because at the end of the day, there are people that have bought into Social Security and Medicare their entire lives that have already lost all that money. It's not like they can recoup it and create a retirement plan at 65 years old without those funds. And so for me, I think when I get into the community, I get very frustrated with that lack of plan.
Okay. Have you encountered anyone who tried to put you through the libertarian purity test?
A little bit.
Yep.
I feel like as a girl, I kind of get a little bit of a pass because there's just like, it's kind of a little bit of a sausage fest. And it's like, hey, a girl.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that kind of happens to everyone though. Whenever they first get into this movement, you have the people who say that you're not a real libertarian if you believe in scenario A, or you're not a real libertarian because you think that some government is necessary, or there are just some people who would say you're not a real libertarian because you don't think like I do.
Exactly.
I think it's probably one of the biggest barriers in this movement is everybody has this well, not everybody, but some people have this Highlander complex, like there can be only one libertarian.
Yeah.
One. I'll pose a question to the rest of you. Have you ever kind of been through that same that same scenario.
I don't want her to feel left out, so I'll call her a statist now and get it over with.
Okay. Perfect. Beautiful. All right.
Yeah, libertarianism is a journey, and that's what most of us forget, I think, is that no one started out, no one woke up from their two-party dichotomy to being full-blown ANCAP or whatever, burn it all down in one, in an hour, a 10-minute Twitter session or whatever, So it happens to everyone, and the important thing is when you're engaging with others that are forgive me for using the term slowly being red pilled, that you don't turn them off of the journey they're looking into.
And I think that becomes, when we're trying to engage new people, I think I've become the most frustrated with that when I'm on Twitter specifically, and I'm always on Twitter. I've had people ask how I can post so much on Twitter. In this year, I became active on Twitter and I had 3 followers.
Doggy.
And I had like 6 comments altogether that I had made ever. And now I'm over 6,000. And a lot of that is me trying to talk to people about how we interact with other people. And how do we actually convince people that we are the correct version of society? It's fine to have a revolution, but I think we get like 3% of votes. And that's, libertarians don't necessarily vote all that often, but that's not a huge amount of the population to have, even if you're an ANCAP, to have a revolution. That's not enough of the population to not just sit in prison.
Yeah. It seems that our loudest voices have the most acerbic way of talking to people about the movement, and people forget about that old adage of honey attracting more flies than vinegar.
Agree. And I think that the principles of libertarianism make the most sense, especially for disenfranchised groups. And they are kind of the people who view us the most as we're a bunch of white rich guys. Like, that's the wrong way to present ourselves.
Yeah, I on a personal note, my mom was on disability for better than 20 years, and I full well remember what food stamps looked like and commodities, and what it looked like waiting in line for commodities, and government cheese tastes like. So, yeah, and I still am a staunch advocate of it for everyone that wants on board.
Well, Kamad cheese is supposed to be the best cheese.
Huh?
Kamad cheese is supposed to be the best cheese.
Cheese is not paleo.
There
It
he
is.
is.
Still tastes good.
But it is keto.
It is
It
kind of,
is
yeah.
keto. It's not paleo. So, anyway, let me jump in here for a second. First of all, welcome, Alicia. It's about time we got you on one of these live streams. What I've run into is, I'm a little bit of a different breed here. See, I'm a minarchist, in that I believe that we need to have the smallest possible government, but I believe that there needs to be a transition period in order to privatize the government services that are currently being just gobbled up by our current government. I don't know if anyone saw the article or the news that Elizabeth Warren was trying to put forth some legislation in order for the government to start manufacturing their own drugs, which is just another step towards socialism. It's just kind of insane. But I believe that it would take probably 20 to 30 years for the government to downsize to where most libertarians believe it should be, which is just, the courts, the military, and not much else. I'm also a big supporter of a flat tax straight across the board. I've worked out the numbers, and right across the board with a $20,000 standard deduction for every individual makes perfect sense. And it would pretty much put everybody on a level playing field where you're paying the same amount regardless of what your income is. And what that does is it gets rid of the class warfare of, oh, it's the but getting back to the
Still with us?
the problem that you have, you just you want too much of the government. They call you a statist, even if you say, hey, I want the government, completely out of my life. Just and it's
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. Is he cutting out for everyone else?
You.
my
Yeah.
internet's cutting out a little bit. So anyway, let me try to make this brief. Basically, what I've run across is
That was brief.
I
my internet
think
sucks.
you have a bad connection, I think. I
Yeah,
don't know what's going
let me. Yeah, I'm gonna be quiet for a bit until I can get this fixed.
Okay, no problem. All right. Michael, how about you? You've never really told me about how you got into this movement. Tell us a little bit about you.
I think I've mentioned before. Well, I live in the Boston area, so like it has a rich history of revolution and all that. So I learned about the history very early. I was being in Massachusetts, it kind of leans Democrat, and I kind of like grew up kind of with the mentality that the Democrats were the good guys for a little bit, but I really didn't pay attention much. By the time I got to voting age, I really wasn't into politics at all. But then like most libertarians, heard like Ron Paul, like, all right, this guy's making a lot of sense, and hearing about libertarianism, and it's like, you kind of find out you're a libertarian. Like you already are, you just don't know.
Okay. That's an interesting way to put it. Now, one thing that we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to talk about ways to engage people, either people who are curious about libertarianism, or maybe even people who are not, but you still want to talk to them about the concept of liberty. And we'll talk about some of the ways to engage them. One group of people in particular that I'd like to talk about is, because this man is having quite the week this week, Trump supporters, people who support Donald Trump. You all have probably seen some of the things that came from Trump this week. First of all, we thought we were getting an early Christmas present, but we are not. The government is not going to shut down. It's going to stay open over the holidays. And the reason why is because Trump walked back his threat that he would shut down the government if he couldn't get his wall. And he didn't get the funding for his wall, but he's going to sign a continuing resolution, or at least he's expected to, and the government's going to stay open. Along with that, he sent about $10 billion in foreign aid to Mexico and Central America, the countries where the immigrants that he is talking about that he wants to keep out of the country are coming from. I don't really understand that too much. And not only that, but he also had to dissolve his charity, and there are some other things happening this week. Now, with all of these things, you would think that by now Trump would begin to question some of his actions compared to his words, but they don't. In fact, another thing too, the bump stock ban. I saw one place where somebody said that this was another chess move because 67D chess or whatever it's up to now. Another chess move that the bump stock ban was going to be sent to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was going to strike it down. And the whole reason why Trump is imposing a bump stock ban is because he's using the Supreme Court to strike it down, and then that'll be that. First of all, does that make any sense to any of you?
No, I wouldn't call it like 4D, 7D, whatever kind of chess you want to call it, but I can see it from the logic of him doing this, and then when they call for more, it's like, I already gave you something, like, buzz off. But, I mean, it still is what it is.
I think I see it.
Oh, sorry about it.
I see it from the perspective of, I don't know that he's ever really been opposed to gun control. I would be surprised if he's ever even fired a gun. You know, he doesn't necessarily have that connection that those of us who live in rural areas do with hunting or growing up just using firearms. To him, it's not something that people need except for his security guards. And so for him, he's never had the connection to this issue, but he is a populist president. His entire shtick since the 90s has been he wants to be popular, he wants to feel adored, and that people admire him. And after the Las Vegas shooting, he was making a lot of promises that he was going to reform gun control specifically. And I think he needs to feel that the middle is starting to like him as he loses some of his base.
In my opinion, the Republicans have always. I'm sorry, you were done. No?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. In my opinion, the mistake the Republicans have always made about him is not seeing the connection between his previous 30, 40 years of what he said regarding politics and who he supported, and even casting aside the how things are done in New York City. You got to play ball with the Democrats. He's been he's most closely ideologically aligned with Clinton circa '96, and Clinton was made the famous gaffe about guns being for duck hunters, and yes, Trump had or at least I believe he had a concealed weapons license in New York City because he was one of the connected elites, but he's never had, like you were saying, he's never had that connection as if he grew up around them, and he's never had a healthy respect for a firearm the same way we all do, where it's something that sits in a closet in a gun safe in a whatever, much like a butcher block full of knives. It's no different, except we go out, we don't take a butcher block to the range.
Yep.
So for him to start spouting a rhetoric that is opposed to the is in contravention to the most stringent NRA member and your average GOA member, shouldn't be a surprise. It really shouldn't. But God Emperor Trump, blah 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 blah.
And we're talking about a salesman, and for the last 3 years, he's been selling us himself. And he's trying to diversify that product as he loses his base.
That's a perfect analogy. He's trying to appeal to more people that's perfect.
Yeah, I could see that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, like one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, you all are probably familiar with a guy named Bill Mitchell.
Idiot.
And Bill Mitchell put out a tweet earlier today that Paleo had showed to the rest of us. He tweeted about 8 hours ago. He said, "War is only popular and fun at the beginning and end. Everyone hates it in the middle. Right now, the war for the soul of America. It is time to buck up and stand behind President Trump 100%. Now, first of all, I don't know how you reach somebody like that, but there are a lot of other people who kind of feel that same sentiment, like as if they will support Donald Trump no matter what he says, no matter what he does. If you look at what's been going on since he became president, okay, so first of all, Yes, church members, exactly. He is one of the archbishops of the Church of Trump. But if you look at what's going on, okay, so he's almost done with 2 full years of his presidency, still no wall, rising deficits, climbing debt. He signed a $1 trillion continuing resolution back in, I think, April, which people tried to say that he could take some of the money from that and put it towards the wall. It was just like a matter of like, more of that 4D chess that people talk about. It took Justin Amash and Thomas Massey to explain to everyone that no, he can't do that. What he signed is what is being spent. And you have all these people who still, their support for this man does not waver at all. Like anything that he does, they say, well, he has something up his sleeve, or he's 10 steps ahead, or he's posturing now and then he's going to act later. No, this man is not. Look, I understand the economy's doing well, the stock market is high, there's a lot of jobs being created. Whether that's him or if that's from before, that's up for debate. I'm not going to talk about that here, but there are a lot of things that this man does. Like he hasn't fulfilled his promises to his base, for one thing, and not only that, but he said so many things that have you scratching your head. Like after the Vegas shooting, when he talked about take the guns first, go through due process second, people did not stop and question that. I mean, well, a lot of people did, but his supporters did not. And I mean, how do you reach them when they are so entrenched in their own opinions and their own ideology and their own Trump mania? How do you reach people like that?
I would argue that they're not entrenched in an ideology, and that's part of the problem. Sorry, go ahead, Paleo.
Well, let's be honest. There's a large portion of those people, the MAGAs, you're never going to be able to reach. Because Alicia's actually 100% correct when she says that they're not entrenched in any type of ideology, except for Trump. They live on his every word day by day, and whether he changes his position, changes his story, changes his promises, they change right along with him. And Bill Mitchell is one of those people that will stand behind Trump 100% no matter what Trump does, which is actually extremely scary if you think about it, because that was the same type of following Hitler had. So if you want to compare Trump to Hitler in any way, shape, or form, which is just kind of asinine, that is the only way you can really do it. That is the only parallel between the two, is that they have blind followers. And, the other thing that, going back to Bill Mitchell's tweet today, that really kind of irked me is, how do you say war is fun? In what world do you believe that war is fun? It's such an ignorant comment. It's such a stupid statement that when, and I've had issues with this guy in the past. When Trump signed the omnibus back in April, I said it was a mistake. It never should have happened, and that I pretty much guaranteed that he was going to sign something similar again, even though he came out and said, I'm never going to sign anything like this again. Sure enough, here we are 6 months later, he signs another one. And he says, I'm going to shut down the government. He had no intention of shutting down the government. And anyone that has, a lick of sense knew that he wasn't going to shut down the government. Because if you look at everything that he's doing, he is constantly on his re-election campaign, and he started this a week after his inauguration, started the 2020 campaign. And so he's doing what he needs to do to appease his base. I think that's a lot of what he does on Twitter, is appeasing his base. And the comments that he makes when he speaks are to appease his base. His policies, on the other hand, the executive order for the bump stocks, some of the other things that he's doing, that really goes against his base. But as long as he can give them some lip service and a couple of sound bites, they're still there for him, and they're still going to support him. When it comes to the economy, obviously, the most libertarian things he's done are the things that are, helping out the economy. When you get rid of regulations and you cut taxes, that is going to spur the economy. And those are very libertarian principles. But then you throw tariffs into the mix, and then you have to, start giving farmers subsidies and throwing welfare at farmers because your tariffs are hurting them. You have to figure that maybe what he's doing with these tariffs is not working the way that these people think, and we shouldn't be giving more welfare to farmers. And honestly, let them grow other crops. Let them grow something else. Stop with the government subsidies and stop with the government welfare. Turn your cornfield into a kale field, or grow some lettuce, or grow something else. Stop with the government subsidies there. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But his base looks at this as, oh, Trump supports farmers. He's supporting the working man. He's supporting, the forgotten voter. And we've heard this term a lot over the past few years, the forgotten voter. The truth is, politicians don't forget any voters. Politicians know who are guaranteed to vote for them, and then they all kind of like vie for the middle just to get that 51%.
They think they do, but Hillary Clinton thought that about Wisconsin.
Yeah, but the thing is that Trump is a bit of an anomaly, because Trump has been a Democrat as long as he's been a Republican, and a lot of people forget that. So he was popular with Democrats when he was a Democrat, and he was popular with Republicans when he was Republican, because if you look back at his record, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, the times he was a Republican and the times he was a Democrat, he was always part of the party that was opposite of the president at the time. So he's a Democrat during Reagan and Bush. He was a Republican during Clinton and Obama. And the reason why he did this was basically to stir the pot, and in order to get people on his side, to get the opposition on his side. So when he ran in 2016, he had people on both sides that were pro-Trump, because he
we're losing you again.
Yep.
And actually, to his point, the guy who was running against Elizabeth Warren here in Massachusetts, he was also a Democrat for as long as he was Republican.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that it kind of goes into that cult of personality that you guys covered a few weeks ago as well, of they're not attached to his ideas. If you look at the end of, for example, Charles Manson's cult, he wasn't even in control of that cult by the time that they were to the point of killing people. But eventually your cult outruns you, and they take your original idea that they liked and run with it in your name. And I think we're kind of running into that point where his supporters are supporting him even if they are no longer really in line with what he's saying or doing.
Okay. Yeah. Cult of personality is definitely something that is really taking place in politics. It's not just with Donald Trump either. You're seeing it with other politicians as well. But like, now another thing too is like, well, for one thing, like, you kind of, whenever you talk to some Trump supporters, you kind of anger them whenever you say anything negative about his policies. Not even attacking him, just saying why you disagree with his policies, or why you think that or why you don't agree with some of the decisions that he makes. And I'm not saying it's hard to have a discussion with them, but they dig in really quick. And so one of the things on the stream is to talk about like how you can reach them without pushing them away, and getting past that defensive mechanism that they have when they try to defend Donald Trump.
I don't know that we're going to be able to, because they reflexive. It seems to me they reflexively go to automatically associating us. Well, all right. Forgive me for running with this example, but in the same way that any criticism of Obama was categorized in their head or castigated as racism, it's, forgive me again, racism, orange man bad. As soon as we say anything, you know, we're automatically filed in their head as orange man bad, and we have nothing intelligent to say, regardless of any quantifiable metric behind what we, added to what we say. If that makes any sense.
No,
Yeah.
they're right-wing snowflakes, basically.
Yes.
I have found.
Go ahead.
I have found that it's a little bit easier when you're talking with someone in person than it is when you're talking to someone who is online. But either way, I've found a few strategies. Like if you start out by agreeing with something that someone has said, they seem a little bit more receptive. And people like to feel agreed with and like you think that they're intelligent. And I don't think that there are any Trump supporters that are what liberals painted them as, that are just complete idiots. Liberals are the smart ones. The Democrats are just superior intelligence because they all went to college, you know. So if you kind of agree with some of their points, I found that that helps. And then you kind of point out the ways that they are just so overly similar to one another. And you go, they're all alike. I don't see a difference. And that's one of my most effective strategies that I've had with my new relatives who are Trump supporters, is to kind of point out, I don't see a difference from presidency to presidency, regardless of who's in office. I see a difference based on who's laughing at who and who's happy that the other one is finally failing. And I don't see a lot of people able to really argue with that as easily when you point out how much alike their guy is, while also hitting at their whataboutism target. So if you say, I don't see the difference between Trump and Hillary on this, well, chances are they were going to deflect to Hillary.
Right. Okay. We have a guy in the chat. His name is Right Wing Daddy, who says that he is a Trump supporter and he's trying to get into the stream. I don't know. He's saying that he would only speak unless spoken to. So I don't know if he just wants to come in here and defend Donald Trump. But he's in the live chat with us right now. So the question is, should we let him in?
I'm checking right now. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I think he's one of my Twitter connections. I'm checking now. I could have sworn we were on Twitter together.
I would say it's up to you whether you want to let randos in.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have an option to dump him if worse comes to worse, I'm not saying that he's
You can kick people out of the stream. You can do that as the moderator.
Yeah, as long as you got a boot button if worse comes to worse,
Especially when you get pissed.
Yeah.
But probably will gonna happen.
He's probably listening right now, so just no swearing and no like really crazy stuff. Use your best judgment.
Yeah, and we've never had.
Trump is a fucking idiot.
I mean, I think it's great that we have new people coming to the stream, and we have a little more viewers tonight than usual. But we don't really have a policy of letting random people in because these are pre-planned. We discuss the topics beforehand. We go over talking points beforehand.
We don't want somebody running in shouting "Baba Booey, Baba Booey, Baba Booey" because they felt like it.
Right. Yeah, that too. So.
Sorry for the background noise. I'll mute if necessary.
I hope he can figure out getting in faster than I could.
Yeah. Well, let's continue on, anyways.
Yeah, we will continue on anyways. So, like, you know, let's go ahead and talk more about the wall. This guy totally ruined our rhythm here. But whenever you talk about the wall, so first of all, the cost of the wall is supposed to be what, about 10 billion or so?
That was 5.
It keeps changing. To be honest with you, it keeps changing. And maybe it was 5 at one time. I think now it is.
Well, that's probably just what it costs to actually build it. Never mind, like, maintain it, armored guards, and, you know, everything else.
Well,
and like that's
you have the
before.
basic price.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just there's just some basic price for this. Put down a wall, but it's not even that strong, but it's a wall.
Yeah.
And you have the price of like we add more shit on it to make it sturdier and security and whatnot. But that's why there are different numbers being thrown about.
Well, and that's
Right.
before all of the legal cases for eminent domain to go through people's property, because people and
That's another
conservation groups are going to fight that as well. We haven't even calculated that.
And not only that, but yeah, there is some private property that it would be built over. And not only that, but there are some places along the border where I don't think you can even put a wall just because of the way the terrain sits. I don't even know how a wall could stand in some of those areas. But whenever you talk about like the cost of the wall, when you talk about eminent domain, and the only thing that people say is we need a wall. Well, we already have a fence, so I don't know how much of the difference between a wall and a fence is. But another thing too is they're going to go underneath it or they're going to go over it. That's another way that they're going to get in. But still, the only thing they say is like the only thing that Trump says is we need a wall. He doesn't say how the wall is going to keep people out. He just says we need to build a wall. And
We've
then
never climbed a ladder.
Do what?
We've never climbed a ladder before.
Right. Yeah.
People are breaking their legs and seriously injuring themselves by jumping off of this 25-foot tall corrugated metal wall fence thing that that they've got now.
Although the new wall should be bigger, and after a certain height, if you drop down, your whole body just breaks, meaning they won't survive it anyway.
What happened to the good old days when we just built a moat?
Yeah, no kidding.
We're going to have a wall. It's going to be a great wall, and it just got 10 feet higher.
We need a moat, we need a wall, and we need thousands of pikemen to stand there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Archers on battlements, you know.
Why don't we just build the wall out of Legos so that way if they break through the wall, at least if they step on them, it'll hurt their feet?
I've got a better idea. We build a little fence that they can climb over, but then we mine an area a quarter-mile deep with Lego.
Yeah, that will keep people away. Because nobody wants to step on the Lego brick.
If we mine the place with Lego,
you rather want to step on a spike than a Lego brick.
Yeah. We had a couple of these last week too.
Yeah, I think I'll send an email to the White House when we're done here, and I'll give that suggestion. Maybe they have a suggestion box.
Yeah, we have a lot of suggestions between this week and last week. We can like make it a segment on every episode where we make funny ways of how the wall could work.
But you know that if Trump suggested we started mining the border with Legos, that the Swedes would stop shipping them to us. They would protest by stopping all Lego shipments.
Why are they Swedes? Lego is from Denmark.
Oh, okay.
Set theory says dump burning oil when on the illegals when they try climbing over.
God damn it, God.
That was
Like,
very
can we-
medieval.
That's very medieval.
That's my buddy Scott.
There's something about optics. Yeah. Something optics bad. Something.
Have we ever made a concerted effort to just get rid of the incentive to come here unless they can support themselves?
And the second, I 100% agree with you. The problem is the second you say that, you lose anyone that says, but you're gonna hurt those that are already here of our own citizens and the migrants, because that as soon as you say anything relating to remove the incentives, anyone who doesn't allow logic to be foremost how they sorry, I'm poorly wording this. As soon as you find someone who doesn't have logic as their primary filter through which they hear, if that makes sense, they will automatically scream how you hate the poor. You say, because removing incentive equals removing the welfare state, no matter how true that may be, how required it should be, and how logical it is, you are automatically a horrible person if you suggest such, because they own the narrative, they own the language.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old Bastiat quote where it's like the socialists would have you believe in that we don't want people to eat just because we don't want the government to raise grain.
Yeah, I believe Bill Buckley had something about it's not that, maybe it wasn't Bill Buckley, but it's not that it's not that we don't want people to have an abundance. It's that we object to how it's paid for. Something like that.
Yeah. But then another thing too, as I said earlier, he's sending $10 billion in foreign aid to Mexico and Central American countries. For one thing, a lot of those areas, because of our drug war, a lot of those areas are in the shape that they're in, and that's why people are trying to leave. But at the same time, when he said things like Mexico is going to pay for the wall, which isn't going to happen, and not only that, but he said one of the things he said during the campaign was they're not sending their best, they're sending their worst. They're sending murderers and rapists and drug dealers and all these other kinds of violent criminals. If that is the case, that they are sending their worst, why send them foreign aid? What does that accomplish?
The idea I've heard, the most damning indictment of foreign aid I've ever heard was that we are paying them we are subsidizing how was that put? Not they're impoverished, but we are subsidizing them with we're keeping the problem in their backyard instead of ours, because if we stop funding them, I've heard this about the impoverished countries, I've heard this about warring countries, I've heard this about terror sponsoring countries, where we send them money to keep their problem over there instead of inspiring their problem to come to our door. And to me, that was one of the most damning indictments of the entire idea of not just the nation we're sending money to. It was a terrible insult to them, but it was also a terrible insult to the way that we conducted ourselves in not only defense from such threats, it was admitting that we are incompetent from defending ourselves from those because we have to bribe them. We have to pay, how do they put that with the mob? We have to pay them to keep their problem there. It was a tacit admission of the way it was. Sorry, I lost the way to describe that. I had a great idea in my head.
All right, well, here's an idea. Why don't we end the war on drugs? You end the war on drugs, and it has a ripple effect. First of all, in the United States, population plummets we'll probably have what is like 80% of our prisons emptied if we are to do that. Secondly, you end the war on drugs and you end all the covert operations with the CIA and the United States going into these Central and South American countries. It also allows those Central and South American countries to start legitimate drug operations where they can freely sell in the United States, and the population in the United States would then not be spending our tax money worrying about trying to stop this flow of drugs, which is going to come here, whether it's legal or illegal. If you just simply make it legal and allow people to buy these things in pharmacies rather than on the street, then you also get the tax revenue from the sales tax. So you actually will increase the money coming into the Federal Reserve. You will decrease the prison population. You will decrease the violence and death that happens all throughout North, Central, and South America because of this, and it eliminates a whole slew of problems. If these people are able to make money and have a better life in the country where they live now, there is no reason for them to want to come here. If the United States stops causing reasons and stops going into these countries and destroying these people's homes, their towns, their villages, their livelihood, and reduces the violence that goes along with the entire drug trade, and the cartels would just be obliterated because of this, you would have legitimate businesses, then you would see a reduction of crime. These people would stop coming. You would see a reduction in immigration, and you would see a mass stabilization throughout North and South America and Central America. And for anyone that's questioning, oh, we're going to have a nation full of drug addicts, I just point to Portugal. Portugal decriminalized all drugs, and what they found is that if you look at the statistics, Portugal has some of the lowest drug addiction rates in all of Europe. They have reduced the number of overdose deaths since they've implemented this policy. They also have reduced the number of new cases of HIV because there's no needle sharing going on. So you actually do a public health service, and you actually improve your standard of living all across the board by doing that. So just simply ending the war on drugs eliminates a huge part of this border problem, and it would cost absolutely nothing to the federal government, but would be actually, like I said, an increase to the federal government because of the sales tax revenue that they would get by being able to sell these different drugs within pharmacies.
Are you denying the validity of the documentary Reefer Madness?
I deny your false truth. That's fake news.
You just want to see a proliferation of jazz musicians, as was foretold in the documentary Reefer Madness.
The propaganda film Reefer Madness? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, that was the joke.
I have not seen that documentary.
Well,
I've
and
never heard of
also,
it. It is made without my permission, so it doesn't count.
All right, hold on.
Oh, and just for the record, I don't do drugs, never have. They're not paleo.
Oh, you drink alcohol, right?
And Madness, there was only
bucks,
one D,
so
so
you
you
take bucks.
don't know the
No,
count, right?
I don't drink alcohol.
All right. Alicia wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I think that in addition to removing the criminalization, think of how many people we would not owe pensions to at the end of their careers in public service for tracking down drug criminals, for housing them in prisons, giving them case management, giving them treatment. I mean, that's a lot of people that we end up paying retirement into right there. People talk about it's impossible to downsize the government without removing the welfare state. But there are a lot of ways that we can remove the amount of people that we're paying into, and they will still have marketable skills out in the private sector.
Right, and also think about the billions of dollars that would be saved each year just housing all of these inmates in these prisons.
Here in South Dakota, it's almost $80 a day per inmate which once you add that up for a year, it becomes substantial. We almost should just send them to a college instead.
It would be cheaper to put that person on welfare than to put them in prison.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just think, all these empty prisons, you could turn them into trendy hipster hotels.
You could turn them into marijuana bread and breakfast or whatever. Bed and breakfast.
Marijuana bed and breakfast. That's
something I want to go to.
That sounds like that could.
That sounds like an investment opportunity right there.
Yeah. You might be an entrepreneur. I don't know, but
it'll be
yeah,
it'll be bed and lunch because waking up late.
Right.
Bed and break.
No, it's more bed and diner.
Yeah.
It becomes close to mine.
No, bed and munchies. What are we talking about?
Is this like looking into a crystal ball for the other dystopian future brought to us by Taco Bell? Like Demolition Man, but it's Taco Bell for the potheads.
Right. I mean, the expenses would be so cheap. I mean, the whole meal could consist of Twinkies.
Yeah, but I like the idea. I could see Alicia on Shark Tank or bed and breakfast. You can call it weed and feed.
There we go.
Like you would have to name at least one of the like the things that you have there, like prison break or something. Like you do like an escape room or something.
Prison break fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say laser tag prison break, but
There'd be a lot of marketable little things you could do in there. Like yard time would really just be you get to see where everything is grown.
Yard time Easter egg hunts where you find edibles in little plastic eggs.
Plus, those uniforms look really comfortable. Like you just get to wear a jumpsuit all day. It sounds perfect.
Okay.
That's what I'm wearing now.
Right. Jumpsuits aren't paleo though. Okay, we are nearing the end of this live stream. Alicia, thank you so much for coming on and being a guest tonight, and thank you so much for not just sharing your journey, but some of your ideas as far as policy and libertarianism. I'd like to thank everyone for watching the Sarcasm and Liberty live stream tonight. We will not be here next Wednesday. It's going to be the holidays. A lot of us will be traveling. We will be back after the holidays, though. But as always, you can find us on Facebook, Sarcasm and Liberty. You can find us on Twitter at sarcasm_liberty. We are also on Minds. We are also on Instagram. But to everyone, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'm going to be that guy and say, see you all next year. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in 2019. Everyone have a good night.
Yep.
You too.
Have a good night.